Now, before I start this video, I just want to give a shout out to JWL Sports. I honestly do like a lot of his content. I like the fact that he actually does defend Brock Purdy. I like the fact that he makes his takes around the other teams as unbiased as possible. I mentioned in his comments not too long ago that when it comes to the Eagles and Dallas, his bias takes over. And I feel like as constructive criticism, I feel like he should look at any of their games with unbiased eyes before making his takes. That's all I said. And he told me that apparently he's not biased and he's not making biased takes, etc., etc. So I'm going to go through a few of the clips that he's made, along with some other proofs about certain scenarios in which he would downplay for one team and I guess overreact for another team. So let's go through these. Now here he says, show me where I said Dak is trash. There's also another comment where he says, when have he ever downplayed Dak? And then there's other comments, but here we go.
But if this game happened, they wouldn't have said, well, it's a comeback. Dak played great. What are you going to do? They wouldn't have said that. They would say, fire the coach, get a new quarterback. And yet you're expecting them to be better. So Nick is trying to say, oh, I overrated their defense. And it's like, yeah, you did. You overrated this team as a whole. Offensively, defensively. Being great against the good teams, that does not make you great. That does not make you top. And again, this game is another perfect example of that, where Dak Prescott gets some of these numbers, and you're going to be like, well, he's leading the NFL in yards and stuff like that, when he's been playing bad. He's been playing bad football. He did not have a good first game. He did not have a good second game. He did not have a good third game. He just didn't. Yet he got yards. He got some stats.
Now, boom, these are stats from both games in which Dak and Jalen played. These are the these are the overall stats from these quarterbacks in these games. As you can clearly see, this is actually Jalen's best game of the year, rating-wise, which is crazy to think about because he had 0 touchdowns and an interception, and he had, of course, his best game yardage-wise. Now, the Eagles was unable to produce much in this game because they only scored 15 points. But what I will say is that the Eagles as a whole played very well. Saquon getting a bomb of a run when they needed it. The defense holding the high-powered running game of the Saints when they needed it. And I do want to go over the nuances between the Eagles game versus the Saints and the Ravens or Saints game, didn't really matter, versus Dallas. But before I do that, I do want to play one more clip just so y'all can understand what I mean when I say the biases takes over.
Going for it on all these 4th downs is just going to drive me nuts, quite frankly. But I agree with RC. Jalen Hurts did play phenomenal, right? And I know people are going to kind of highlight the turnovers and stuff, but Jalen Hurts did play phenomenal.
Wait a minute!
Now I'm highlighting this situation right here simply because in this particular breakdown, you see that the first touchdown was just a breakaway run from a 65-yard run from Saquon Barkley, which I believe might have been a 1-play to 2-play drive. The second touchdown, which I guess you can say Jalen played a part of it because he threw the ball to Goddard. But the fact of the matter is that that particular play only developed in the way that it did due to the unfortunate circumstances of 2 defenders running into each other. That had nothing to do with Jalen. That was just, in all words, the luck of the draw, that the gods turned the game in your favor, because what? That was crazy. I don't know what the defenders was looking at that time to not see each other before. Goddard wasn't even near their vicinity for them to crash into each other, to be honest. It surprised me nonetheless. But all in all, that was the main reason that they even scored the last touchdown, to ice the game in a sense. And I will give credit to their defense for stopping Carr on the last drive. Like I said, in this game particularly, I feel like everyone but Jalen played well. Jalen did okay. He did get the ball. He did move the ball up and down to an extent. I mean, he did pull off 300 and some yards. A lot of them were yak yards, but he did pull off 300 and some yards. And that pass, I guess, led them to a victory. But again, those are the nuances that caused that touchdown.
But a truly great team, when the Cowboys face a truly great team, a team that's well coached, well executed, humming along, they're just clearly not in that league. We've seen it now for the last 2 years, without a doubt. We've seen it. This is why I called out the Dallas Cowboys fans for complaining last week about their game versus the Dolphins, where they were complaining about the refs and the calls and this or that. And I kept saying, what goes around comes around, what goes around comes around. And they said, no, that's ridiculous, that's ridiculous, that's ridiculous. Now they truly won because of a terrible call. Now, if you don't want to take my word for it, take Troy Aikman's word for it. Troy Aikman is literally a Dallas Cowboys Hall of Famer at the Mount Rushmore, the top of the top of the top. And even he said it was ridiculous that clearly the Cowboys lost that game.
And the reason why I showed these two clips is simply because Dallas's goalpost, I guess is the best way to phrase it, always gets moved. And it's just, in my mind, it's unfair. Now, I don't believe Dallas is a well-organized team. I do solely, like, this is a Dak Prescott rant, if anything, or a Jalen Hurts rant, both, honestly, because these are two quarterbacks. One gets a lot of praise, one gets a lot of hate, but the one who gets a lot of praise isn't that good of a quarterback, in my opinion, and the one that gets a lot of hate is a really good quarterback, in my opinion. And I'm gonna go over some other statistics later in the video, but I wanted to highlight how the goalpost has been moved. The narrative last year, 2023, was that Dallas only beat up on tomato cans. It's the word everyone kept using. Yet they beat 3 playoff caliber teams. They beat the Eagles, they beat the Lions, they beat the Rams. And in order of, I guess, least to greatest, Rams, Eagles, Lions. And their record shows respectively 10 wins, 11 wins, 12 wins, I want to say. With that being said, the Lions game was the craziest one out of all of them, because everyone says that the Lions should have won that game and that the Lions were robbed in that game. As true as that particular call might have been, that play, that drive, honestly, should not have happened. So I'm gonna show another clip and explain. So I wanted to highlight this play simply because Aiden Hutchinson right here, as you can see, his leg is extended trying to trip up Tony Pollard. Now, Tony Pollard actually avoided this, but here's the tripping call penalty right here so that you can understand. I took this from some other video, and I do appreciate whoever explained this whole situation to me, because it made sense after I viewed everything. Now, Aiden Hutchinson is attempting to trip Tony Pollard, but for some reason this call was on Peyton Hendershot. Now, Peyton Hendershot is the defender right there in front of Hutchinson. Hutchinson attempted to trip. Hendershot was called for the tripping call. That moved the Dallas Cowboys back 15 yards. They did one run play. I believe the next play was 2nd and 14, I want to say. Because they started first and 10 plus 15, 1st and 25. That's a big penalty. They made it to 2nd and 14. They ran like 0 time off the clock, I'll be honest with you. They threw another pass. That pass was incomplete, wasting even less time off the clock. And because they're now in a 4th and whatever yardage situation, they were forced to kick a field goal, scoring 20-13 being what happened when the drive was done. Now, let's say they actually called this correctly. This would have put Dallas at the 8-yard line, in which Dallas would have to do 2 things: run the ball to waste the clock and to waste their timeouts. Secondly, this would have also allowed them to rather kick a field goal if they didn't score a touchdown on those runs. If they did, it was over. And if they did score the field goal, they would have had way less time to move down the field like they did in that final drive. They had 1minute and 40-something seconds, and you just saw Dallas do the same thing to the Pittsburgh Steelers this year. So it's easy to say that with that much time, 1minute and 40 seconds is a decent amount of time. Versus what, 20 or so, like I would say 40 seconds, maybe 40 seconds tops, if Dallas actually got the penalty in their favor. The controversial call should never have actually come up, because this penalty is right before that drive. So be that as it may, though Dallas quote unquote stole the victory from the Lions, it should have never happened in the first place. People only look at what they hate, and Dallas is a team that a lot of people hate. So the fact that Dallas won, it rubbed a lot of people the wrong way. They're only going to look at the one situation. They're not going to look at the whole game. They're not going to look at the fact that Jared Goff threw multiple picks that game. They're not going to look at the fact that Dak had a better game than Jared Goff in that series. All I'm trying to say is that Dak gets discredited for doing amazing things with little pieces around him. Jalen Hurts is good at running the ball. I do give him that credit, but he hasn't been running like he had ran back in 2022. And Jalen Hurts has multiple elite pieces around him. He's always had a good running back for the last 3 years. He's always had 2 elite receivers for the last 3 years. He had an elite tight end in Goddard. I believe Goddard and Ferguson for Dallas is kind of, on par with each other. Like, I believe in Ferguson. A lot of people do, a lot of people don't. Like, some people just think of him as like, reliable, but I feel like Goddard and Ferguson to their quarterbacks are kind of the same, a reliable go-to. Dak for the last 2 years has not had a decent running game. This year, he definitely ain't got no running game. That shit garbage. Their defense is the only thing that has changed from last year to this year, and it's probably simply because they're getting adjusted and accumulated to running at a real game under their new coordinator. I also wanted to talk about some good things, because like I said, I didn't want to come on here and just bash this guy, because he does make some good points here and there. He actually defends Brock Purdy as this year has gone on, because the one thing that everyone kept saying, can Brock Purdy win without his Avengers? Can he at least play well without his Avengers? The answer is yes. And there's 2 advanced statistics I want to go over that kind of puts Brock Purdy and Dak Prescott in the same light. And I'm going to put up the stats if I can find them. But it's simply this. Dak Prescott and Brock Purdy are leading the league in tight window throws, meaning these quarterbacks' aggressiveness percentage pretty much tracks the amount of passes attempts a quarterback makes into tight coverage. Pretty much if a defender is within 1 yard or less of the receiver at the time of completion or incompletion. Aggressiveness is shown as a percentage attempts into tight windows over all of their passing attempts. So, when you go and look at this, Dak Prescott is actually leading the league in aggressive throws, along with Brock Purdy, who is number 2 in the league in aggressive throws. And just to make more sense of this, Dak and Brock Purdy, this is not counting week 6 because I do every once the entire week is over. So I haven't added Brock Purdy's week 6 numbers to my records here. But Brock Purdy actually has more air yards than all other quarterbacks. And guess who's second? Dak Prescott. Which means that though they have high tier yards, like I think they're top 5 in yards, Dak Prescott being number 2 right now, only below Geno Smith. Dak Prescott actually isn't being stat padded by yak yards. And so when it comes to air yards, Brock Purdy is actually number 1 again, and Dak Prescott is number 2, which means not only are they making very tough throws, they're not stat padding their stats that much in comparison to other QBs when it comes to yak yardage. So with that being said, with Brock Purdy not having all his pieces around him, he's actually playing very well. His team might not be scoring as much. The defense is letting off the gas in the second half, and I honestly want to blame the defense, not really Brock Purdy, for the losses that they've been having recently, even though Fred Warner has been playing lights out. But that's about it. Don't throw in his direction. He doesn't make the plays. But Dak Prescott also has been held back by his defense. His defense gave up 6 consecutive scores against the Saints? Consecutive. And then Baltimore was running down their throat consecutively. I just wanted to say to Julian, you're doing a good job. I like your takes when it comes to everything else so far, but the Eagles and Dallas. And I just wanted to say, as a constructive criticism, that if you remove your bias when it comes to those two, because like I said, I can be an advocate for Dak Prescott, but I can also say that the Dallas Cowboys overall organization is trash. They got a lame duck head coach who has very horrible time management. They got a new defensive coordinator, and their defense is not accustomed to him, so they're kind of looking lacking right now. They have no run game, and you can blame that on Jerry Jones for being very stubborn. They're now having to deal with injuries, especially on the defense side. All they have is Dak Prescott. And Dak Prescott playing A1 right now, in my opinion at least. But overall, I just hope not just Julian, but anybody else who's interested in football to look at the nuances and the situations of advanced analytics and be able to take for what it is and not let the media, especially the media, dictate a person's viewpoint because their bias takes over. You have those like Stephen A. Smith, who's a known Cowboy hater, who would always say bad things about Dak Prescott, but Dak Prescott do be balling. Like, it's hard to fight against this guy, but it's easy to go against him because he's a Cowboy. I hope people look at the Eagles organization and not just solely, honestly, I hope people really listen to me, because I think that's all the Eagles are missing, a good quarterback. If the Eagles had a good quarterback with the talent that they have around them, bruh. NFC East might have a back-to-back divisional winner finally. And if the Dallas Cowboys like actually put talent around, well, put more talent around in the offensive skill position points, they too could be a juggernaut. Jerry Jones should take notes from the Eagles. Put the star pieces around the star quarterback. And the Eagles just need a new quarterback. That's my opinion. Brock Purdy is a damn good quarterback. He's proven it this year. And anyone who says otherwise can go fuck off. I don't know. And I didn't make this video for y'all to like and subscribe. I literally just did this for educational purposes. If y'all like and subscribe, coolios, but I don't make content, so I'm not trying to get rich or famous off of this. But if y'all do like it, y'all might want me to make more. Maybe I'll get into it. But this was also a hassle for me because I do a lot of shit and I had to edit this video. But I also just wanted to make my points. But I had to edit this video, guys. Like, bruh. Who does all this by themselves is crazy. Not me.